Be afraid. Be very afraid. Evil lurks here. And here. And especially here. Where the living, the dead, and the undead stalk the storefronts.
You're seeing things and you're hearing things.
Sidewalks.
You can definitely feel the darkness.
And cemeteries.
There was a soldier standing right in front of me.
Here on Most Terrifying Places in America, Cursed Towns.
This space is full of a lot of suffering.
You get a sense of the spirits that pass through here and the horrors that they must have gone through.
It's just, you got like this dark energy. You could just feel it. You're seeing things and you're hearing things. It's terrifying.
In the 1800s, before germ theory and modern medicine, cities were constantly cursed by lethal outbreaks. And the port city of New Orleans was so deadly, people gave it the nickname, the Wet Death. Bodies piled up in the streets, some from disease, but others from so-called cures, dispensed by America's first and single most terrifying pharmacy.
The Pharmacy Museum is housed in America's first licensed pharmacy. So this building opened in 1823 as an apothecary. It was run by an individual named Louis Dufio Jr., and he was the first person to receive the distinguished title of a licensed medical practitioner.
In the early days of medicine, there wasn't much specialization, so Dufio handled all sorts of ailments and did so with what was called drastic medicine, where the treatments were often as painful as the sickness, and sometimes far worse.
So this involved things like mercury injections, which causes insanity, strychnine, which rips the muscles from the bone, bloodletting, which obviously is a bad idea, but was super popular. And they were just hoping that this would do something.
Among the deadliest and most common diseases in New Orleans was yellow fever, a colorful name for the darkest of symptoms: black vomit, jaundiced skin, intense suffering, and death.
So soon after New Orleans' greatest yellow fever epidemic, which was 1853, killed 1 out of 15, Louis Dufio Jr. brought his family back to Paris and died. I suspect he had contracted yellow fever. Right before he left, he sold the building to a woman, Celestine Dupas, and her husband was an amateur physician.
Known for his signature top hat, the flamboyant Joseph Dupas was an opportunistic doctor who took advantage of the sick and desperate.
When you have a vast population, citywide, sick, afraid, desperate, they're coming to their doctors with a sense of hope. They want something. They want their suffering relieved, they want their pain relieved, and they're willing to submit to just about anything.
Those cursed to search the streets for a cure, Dupas used them for horrific and dangerous medical experiments.
Things like amputations without anesthetics, shoot your body full of toxins, sell voodoo potions, trephination. That is the boring of a hole into the cranium. And within a couple of days, despite the fact that you've been seeking treatment, most likely you're gonna die.
With so many deaths on this site from both diseases and their experimental treatments, some tormented souls have lingered on here for well over a century.
Every time I come to the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum, I feel like I have an interaction with something here.
We're in Pharmacy Museum. Kind of got that creepy vibe going, and you could just, the hair on your arms and your necks are just kind of like popping out. And you're like hearing these strange noises. And all of a sudden, we're looking over, and like kind of on the corner of my eye, I see a book just kind of move off the counter. And that right there, I was totally freaked out. It's creepy. It is. It's creepy.
So we were coming through here one day, and I swung my camera through this rod on here, getting a picture. So as we took a closer look at this photo, we noticed the top hat. There he is, you know, DuPont in my picture. I mean, that creeped us out.
When Dupat's quackery of pills and potions didn't work, he'd take patients up to the hidden back staircase to the second floor for special treatment. Now, dozens of visitors and staff members have reported being pushed by some unknown force on this stairway to hell.
One of the more interesting things that I've reviewed here is security camera footage, particularly of that back staircase. Now, there's an image of a person walking up that staircase wearing a lab coat. That's probably Joseph Dupont.
About 2-3 years ago, I was on the second floor, and I felt this very evil presence, like this creepy energy. And I turned around, and there was this giant brown top hat and coat, and it disappeared so quickly, but I swear it was Dr. Dupont.
If you're feeling poorly in the port city of New Orleans, head to the cursed crossroads of the famous French Quarter, where you might find yourself on pins and needles, like so many others before you, at America's first and decidedly most haunted pharmacy.
I have no doubt this building is haunted.
There's a lot of spirit activity here.
Sometimes you'll feel a breath on the back of your neck and your hair will just stand up. I have no doubt this building is haunted.
I feel like there's a lot of spirit activity here that still needs to be sorted out.
You don't know what kind of doors or windows to another world you could be leaving open.
If you don't close that door after opening it, then you can be stuck with something that you really don't want in your life.
Just over the bridge from America's original cursed city, Salem, Massachusetts, and a mere 3 miles from where the witch trials took place, sits a century-old building with a dark past of its own. Occupying the corner storefront of this imposing edifice is a tattoo parlor specializing in the macabre. But it's the daily appearance of a sinister shadow man that has left a permanent mark on their patrons.
This building was constructed in the 1800s as a lodge for the International Organization of Odd Fellows. The Odd Fellows is a secret fraternal organization. They date back to the early 1700s, and the original formation was during a time when lots of secret societies were forming. The Masons were obviously stonemasons originally that got together, and there were other guilds and so on. But there were all these people that had occupations where there weren't a lot of them. So they figured, we need our own guild as well. They were a bunch of these odd fellows.
But these odd fellows weren't just men and eventually women with odd jobs. They were famous film stars like Charlie Chaplin, or Supreme Court justices, and even 5 future presidents. Their secret rituals weren't always fun and games. They included laying members in coffins and bizarre hazing ceremonies.
One of the rituals we do know about is the pledge induction. And what happens is you will blindfold a pledge and walk him into a room that's only lit by candles. And when the blindfold comes off, he's going to be alone with a human skeleton. And the whole point is to face your own mortality.
In dozens of buildings that were once used as Odd Fellows lodges, full human skeletons have been found hidden in walls, floors, attics, and secret rooms. Many believe these bones are the remains of those that still haunt them.
I think bones in a wall is as good a reason as any for a haunting, because something is crying out from the past.
Twin brothers and tattoo artists, Ryan and Matthew Murray, grew up in Salem and have always been drawn to the occult. They picked this building to house their studio because of its Gothic design and murky history. But with this real estate transaction, they got more than they bargained for.
It wasn't long after we moved in here that we knew that there was a presence here and that we weren't alone.
Underneath the stairwell was a sealed door that I cut open when we first moved here, and shortly after is when strange things started happening.
You'd always hear noises and footsteps. Sometimes you'll feel a breath on the back of your neck and your hair will just stand up.
Or you pass a mirror and you catch a glimpse of something that's not yourself.
In the Black Veil, unlike other Oddfellow lodges, a skeleton has not been found. Yet, Ryan and Matthew fear that someone's remains remain in their studio and is trying to scare them away from their location.
The Shadow Man is definitely a male figure, slender, and it lurks in the darkness. We've seen it slowly passing through the halls.
We'll have clients that are here to visit, and they'll often say that they see a shadow in one of the rooms.
This building is the twins' artistic playground, but they feel the Shadow Man is not playing around. He has scared many staff members and customers.
I actually saw a shadow out of the corner of my right eye towards the stairwell. I was definitely scared for a moment. Not long after that, that's when the different events started happening. So I'm wondering if he made himself present.
There was a period of time where I think the candles actually caught fire.
I've never had candles flare up and drapes fall off the window behind us. It was creepy.
A recent encounter with the Shadow Man was so alarming, it left a woman in tears.
Late last fall, our friend Ashley Rose, she had her fashion show here at our studio. One of the models, she saw an entity downstairs.
A shadow living in one of the rooms, and she pointed to it and was very upset, was crying, saying something bad lived there.
With its history of witches burned at the stake, death-like coffin rituals, hidden skeletons, and the spine-chilling Shadow Man's multiple manifestations, this small New England town is not for the faint of heart, but these twin brothers persevere and have maintained a steady hand while inking images in America's most terrifying tattoo parlor.
I definitely feel like this is a restless spirit, and hopefully we can get to the bottom of whatever's going on and hopefully have them pass on to the other side.
This town really gives me the creeps.
Whoever fired the first shot, no one knows.
For all of this to have happened on Christmas night is unthinkable.
You can definitely feel the darkness.
Definitely a place full of spirits.
This has to be one of the most disturbing places in America.
This town really gives me the creeps. You step on the streets and your hair stands up. Definitely a place full of spirits.
For all of this to have happened on Christmas night is unthinkable.
South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, is a small town outside of Chattanooga. At the turn of the century, this city was thriving, thanks to its iron foundry.
In December 1926, the H. Manufacturing Company decided to shutter its doors. Due to the economic slowdown, that naturally put a real strain on the community itself because there were 750 employees there. And, you know, these people depended on those wages. People were starting to lose their homes. They were being evicted from their homes. There was virtually no one in this town that wasn't affected by the shutdown of that industry.
The factory soon reopened, hiring cheaper, non-union workers.
That really bothered the union workers here, and they set up picket lines. It divided the community. And as a result, the tensions are getting high here in South Pittsburgh after this. There's now a divide between the Sheriff's Department of Marion County, Tennessee, and the South Pittsburgh Police Department. One is union, and the other is non-union. By Christmas Day, it started to become a powder keg. You just knew that eventually something was going to occur. On Christmas night, right here at the corner of Cedar Avenue and 3rd Street, is when it finally come to a climax. Whoever fired the first shot, no one knows. But what we do know is that there were at least 20 shooters involved. One of those was on one of the upper floors here of the Property Lee Hotel. When it was all said and done that Christmas night, you had 6 law enforcement officers dead. You had the police chief of South Pittsburgh dead, and you had the sheriff dead.
The events that happened that night rocked this town. There was so much anger and so much hurt and pain that you can feel it in everything, in the buildings and in the street. That kind of feeling just doesn't go away. That kind of energy goes somewhere, and you can definitely feel the darkness, and you can feel the hate and the pain when you walk through these streets.
The townspeople mourned and eventually moved on, but many believe the souls of the 6 slain officers never found peace. Long after the bodies were moved and the blood washed away, the dead men's specters linger in that fateful intersection.
There are people in this town being touched, and they feel that quite a bit. Hair tugs in the bars and in the restaurants, bottles falling off of the walls, tables being scooted.
Generations of locals know the lawmen's spirits haunt the streets beneath the downtown post clock. And every evening, when the sun sets, the ghosts are cursed to relive the battle.
And when you're walking at night, you see the shadows moving between the buildings.
Last night, walking down Main Street, right in the center of town, I was hit with the image of a man walking down the street. You could even see his reflection in the glass. I mean, it was substantial.
While the spirits of South Pittsburgh's finest walk the streets, at least one ghost keeps watch from above. No one knows the identity of the sniper who fired from the Robert E. Lee Hotel. But his shadow still stalks the hotel's hallways, scoping the fatal view from the window.
We were actually on the 2nd floor in the front room. It's right above us. And we saw the silhouette of a man standing there.
We also saw the silhouette in the hallway next to a door that literally leads to nowhere. And we heard a disembodied voice say, Ben.
Ben is actually the first name of one of the law enforcement officers who lost their lives that night.
I can feel that these men want their stories to be told, and it's so powerful and also really troubling at the same time.
Many claim South Pittsburgh streets remain cursed to this day. 6 souls doomed to relive the most violent chapter in this town's history, night after night, at the corner of 3rd and Cedar.
We could tell something was with us.
My heart rate was going crazy. We tried to start the car and it wouldn't start.
She likes to attack men more often than women.
Oh, shoot. Emily's Bridge is one of the most renowned in Vermont for being haunted.
The bridge here definitely is the most supernatural event that we have here in Stowe that seems to have been going on for over 170 years.
Emily's story is by far our biggest ghost story.
I heard that she likes to attack men more often than women. Oh. I've had vibes that I can't explain any other time in my life.
I was not a ghost believer. But when you have tons of different pictures and stories, you begin to wonder.
In the Green Mountains of Vermont, connecting country roads in the scenic resort town of Stowe, stands a weather-worn wooden bridge, the kind New England is known for. Rustic Vermont is home to over 100 authentic 19th century covered bridges, the highest concentration in America.
Covered bridges were found all over because the cover kept the snow off it, kept the rain off it, so that they lasted longer.
These quaint, picturesque structures attract over 1 million tourists to the Green Mountain State. But there's one bridge that draws curious visitors, hoping for an encounter with the supernatural.
So the Goldbrook Bridge was built in the 1840s, basically as a connective bridge between these two small hamlets here.
The Goldbrook Bridge was named for the gold nuggets found in the stream below. But locals know this landmark by another name, Emily's Bridge, named after the jilted bride-to-be who died here in the 19th century and stuck around to haunt all those who cross.
The story of Emily was that she was a teenage girl, 16, living here in Stowe in the early part of the 1850s. Came from a very poor family and started dating a young man who was from a very wealthy family. They started to talk about marriage. His parents said, not going to happen, we will not allow it. So the young couple, being teenagers, they came up with a secret pact that they would meet here at midnight. And when she got here and the clock went well after midnight, he did not show up, and she was so distraught, she jumped off the bridge. The next morning, her parents found her body in the stream below.
But because she was an unhappy soul, her soul never went to rest, and her soul is found here, heard and seen and felt frequently.
According to legend, Emily's spirit lingers to this day, growing more vengeful by the year, and she's especially hostile toward men.
Emily seems to target male visitors because she feels she was jilted. So most of the weird experiences down here happen to males.
My boyfriend and I came to Emily's Bridge on a cold, cold winter night. Decided that it would be something cool we could try to experience because we'd heard some of the lore around it. We pulled onto the bridge, cut the engine, and locked our doors. We kind of just sat there listening to see if we could hear anything unusual or see anything. Nothing was really happening, but we had been in the car long enough, it started to fog the windows up. We sat on the bridge for a good 10 minutes with nothing happening. We were kind of getting ready to leave, and I look over at his window, and there's just the set of cold, hollow eyes. No pupils. There was no mouth, but you could see very distinct, like straw-like hair pushed up against the window. My heart rate was going crazy, and that's when we tried to start the car, and it wouldn't start. It just kept stalling, stalling. Eventually, by the third or fourth try, it did spark up, and we got the hell off the bridge. We were freaked out on the ride home as well, and we decided to check the car out. And sure enough, there was scratches down the side of the vehicle, same side that she had pushed her face up against. I believe that the apparition appeared on his side because he was the male in the vehicle.
And those who taunt Emily in her cursed covered byway soon discover that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned.
So I heard about Emmy's Bridge, and we're like, oh, we gotta go check that out. and we were interested in doing it.
The moment we got here, we could feel the vibes. My brother Mike had gotten out of the car in a hurry. He was excited. I was a little more nervous. We could just feel something there. We could tell something was with us. Like she was right behind me, breathing on me. I felt like she didn't want us here. My brother had gotten the idea to ask what it was like to be dead.
What's it like to be dead?
What's it like to be dead? What's it like to be dead? What's it like to be dead?
As soon as I asked her that, I felt like this scratch.
Oh.
Something scratched me. I looked at my hand, and that's, oh my God. I was bleeding. It was deep enough for it to bleed.
He's screaming. He leaned up onto the bridge like he needed to hold himself while he was holding his hand.
I felt weakness in my legs, weakness in my arms. I honestly was terrified.
That's the moment I said, get in the car, we gotta go.
I got home, washed it up, and I just felt weird. It felt like there was an evil spirit inside me. I just don't know what happened after that, but it was very terrifying for me.
After the experience on the bridge, I started to get a little worried. I had brought my brother to a priest. He had blessed him, had read some passages from the Bible over him to cleanse him.
Then after that, I just felt like relieved. I felt like I was lifted.
I think if you're gonna come to Emily's Bridge, you shouldn't antagonize a spirit.
Oh.
Nothing good comes from that.
Take extra caution when crossing the Gold Brook, because this is one covered and cursed country road that may be a bridge too far.
Murderers, rapists, kidnappers. There were some pretty foul people that was housed here.
A warden who actually tortured the inmates to death and buried them under the walls of this prison.
I saw a full apparition.
This place can be very scary.
There were some bad happenings that took place here.
There was a lot of dark, violent activity. I think that's still left behind here.
I knew something else was in there with me.
There's scary sounds and voices that you hear.
It can be one of the most terrifying places. I've seen some of the toughest individuals. I've seen them leave this place running.
I truly believe that this West Virginia Penitentiary is one of the most haunted locations in the world.
On the banks of the Ohio River sits the small West Virginia town of Moundsville, named for the massive 62-foot-high burial mound located at its center.
It's one of the largest conical mounds in the United States. It predates Native American Indian history, goes back over 2,000 years.
The ancient Adena people buried their dead in the giant mound. And today, the people of Moundsville believe that spirits trapped within the sacred heap may have cursed their town, most evident in Moundsville's ominous structure, the West Virginia Penitentiary.
This prison was built in 1866, right after West Virginia became a state. This was a maximum security penitentiary, so there were murderers, rapists, kidnappers. There were some pretty foul people that was housed here. This was for the worst of the worst.
The Department of Justice actually said that it was in the top 10 most violent correctional facilities in the country. The deaths that happened here were gruesome. Inmates being skinned alive, inmates being burned alive, inmates being decapitated. And it didn't just come from the inmate side of things. The administration was extremely brutal towards the inmates that were incarcerated here. There's the story of a warden who actually tortured the inmates to death and buried them under the walls of this prison.
With murders and suicides and executions all combined together, there were a total of 998 deaths at this prison. There were inmates who pleaded to be transferred from here on their deathbed. They didn't want to die inside this facility.
The inmates believed if you died in prison, your soul stays in prison, that you're trapped here.
This superstitious belief may have been inspired by the giant burial mound, the only thing prisoners could see from their barred windows.
You survived the best way you knew how as an inmate, so some inmates became snitches or informants to the officers, hoping to get more privileges There was one inmate, R.D. Wall, and he took care of the boilers to keep the heat fired and so forth. He was considered to be the warden's chief snitch. So one day a couple of inmates paid him a visit. R.D. was brutally murdered. So there were some bad happenings that took place here.
Citing cruel and unusual living conditions, the state closed down the penitentiary in 1995. Today, the deserted building is preserved as a landmark, but locals believe the dead prisoners' cursed spirits are still serving their sentence.
I came to the prison one night before my night tour. No one else is in the building but me. And as I was walking through the cell block, every door on that cell block slammed shut at the same time. All the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I got out of there really fast. Nobody else is in the building. It has to be something not living. Somebody just did not want me in there. That's the feeling that I got. They did not want me in that building that night. When people are on the tours, they hear noises as we're walking through. They'll hear different kind of creaks. We'll be walking past a door, it will slam shut. They'll hear it sounds like keys rattling. They'll see shadows go across the wall. You see it all the time, and you don't know what is making those shadows, but you know something is there with you. We have a lot of people who don't make it through the tour.
And while many run from the prison in fear, others are drawn in by its gruesome aura.
There's a lot of the history that is just so dark, so evil, so saturated in blood. It seemed interesting, intriguing, to say the least. It felt like the place just drew me in and wouldn't let me go. I came up here to the psych ward to record spirit voices on a digital recorder, trying to capture what I hoped to be an answer from the other side. And it seemed as though the energy was building, but nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden, I heard what sounded like somebody in this room fired off a shotgun. When I listened to the audio recorder, it was there. And not only that, but you can hear what sounds like a piece of metal hitting the concrete floor. I haven't experienced anything that intimidating and that terrifying before. I've not been able to find any specific event that could tie this experience to the history of this penitentiary. But it's not a far stretch to say that there could be an instance where an inmate stepped out of line and a correctional officer had to use their firearm. And I think those inmates that lived and died here remain inside this building.
He was murdered back in 1929. But R.D. Wall's spirit still haunts the area where he was killed.
It was a summer afternoon. I was getting ready to instruct a class here at the penitentiary. I got here early, and I walked around the property to see if there was anything in the way that could possibly trip people. I walked through the boiler room, and as I started to exit, I felt something. I saw a full apparition walk from one side to the next side. I know that there were only two people that were here in the building at the time, myself and another tour guide, and I thought that must be Lori. I looked into the corner, and there was no one there. I'm sure that it was R.D. Wall.
R.D. Wall is just one of the hundreds of dead inmates lurking in the shadows at Moundsville. But what is it that makes this prison one of the most haunted places in America?
The hate, the remorse, great trauma, pain, all of this energy hangs here, and it's a perfect recipe for paranormal activity.
When people come here, more often than not, they leave with some terrifying experience that has them absolutely chilled to the bone.
Cursed by the nearby burial mound, it appears the inmates' ghosts are forever doomed to roam the prison, serving a sentence that will never end.
Everything that you could ever see in a scary movie has happened here.
I was petrified. It was me dead.
There was a soldier standing right in front of me. Fort Knox is one of the most haunted places in Maine.
Everything that you could ever see in a scary movie has happened here.
I've never been to a place that's been this haunted.
The pristine coast of Prospect, Maine is a boat lover's paradise. But directly across the Penobscot Bay, the shoreline was once soaked with the blood of American soldiers. Penobscot River, 1779. As the Revolutionary War raged on, the British claim a stronghold in Maine. An American expedition of 4,000 men traveled north to take it back. In the skirmish, 44 U.S. ships were lost, as well as the souls of 470 men.
One of the biggest naval losses in American history, and it was a huge loss for the Americans.
Decades later, Fort Knox was built over the banks where their blood was spilled.
A lot of people, when they hear Fort Knox, they think of the fort with all the gold, but this is actually the original Fort Knox, named after George Washington's Secretary of War.
The reason the fort was built were the British maintained that they owned much of Maine. And this really was the epicenter of a lot of battles, both in terms of the American Revolution and the War of 1812.
The U.S. military builds Fort Knox out of fear of continued attack from the British. But by the time construction is complete, the English are our allies, and Fort Knox becomes a remote outpost maintained by a skeleton crew.
Right shoulder, chef, hard.
In 1923, the state of Maine purchases Fort Knox from the U.S. government and would eventually turn it into a state park. But the souls of the long-dead soldiers and sailors of the Penobscot expedition can never be furloughed. Employees and tourists alike say it seems the spirits have no plans to stand down.
Over the years, people have reported that they've seen orbs, heard voices, footsteps, seen shadows, apparitions.
People have seen soldiers marching. You can often see their arms swinging, they say. We've heard the doors slamming, but the doors never move. I can't explain that.
People have experiences here.
I didn't really believe in ghosts when I started here. My opinion definitely changed the first day that I started here as a tour guide. I had something unexplained happen to me. I was locking up. The fort wasn't open to the public and was in an alley. Not much light comes through the windows. You don't expect to hear anyone or see anyone, and I had a man holler at me.
Attention.
What it sounded like to me was attention.
Attention.
In the middle of Long Alley, I got 2 strong taps on the shoulder. It was enough for me to turn around, and there was no one there. And you can see one end to the other, so I would have known for sure if there was someone there. I was shocked. I had no idea that something unseen could feel like that. I definitely thought people were joking before. Not anymore.
While some report the voices of long-dead soldiers echoing through the alleyways, others have encountered something much more menacing.
It was an overcast day when I was here and just checking out the fort. I walked into the officers' quarters, sat down on a bench. I had my attention brought to the right-hand side of me. I noticed that there was a soldier standing right in front of me with his head dressed with a wound. When he approached me, he got in my face, tilting his head back and forth, raising his hands. intimidatingly, as if to say he didn't want me here. I felt unsettled, and then he just dissipated. I feel like he wanted my attention just to let me know he needed me to leave.
I was volunteering for a fundraiser at the fort upstairs. I wanted to come back downstairs. When I put my foot where I thought was another step in the platform was actually a stair. I went into a lean like I was going to fall down the stairs. I visually saw myself at the bottom of the stairs, dead. As soon as I thought that, I was thrown. Something pushed me and pinned me to the wall. And I was held there. I could actually feel pressure, like somebody had their arms around me to stop. I was petrified. When my fear went to pain, because it was painful, I was released. If I had gone down, I know I would have died. I just know. I know what I saw at the bottom of the stairs before I get pinned. It was me dead.
For over 150 years, in peace and in war, Fort Knox has stood watch above the mighty Penobscot River. And at this cursed fortress, best be on your guard. The residents are always ready to recruit one more. From a pharmacy with a prescription for death to a tattoo parlor where a sinister shadow has left its dark mark, we've finished our journey to America's most cursed towns. So next time you visit one of these macabre municipalities, make sure you pack for what could be a very long stay.